Sarah realized Derek wasn't done destroying her life. He wanted her there to witness his triumph, to show the world what happens to women who can't keep up with successful men. What Derek didn't expect was that the broken woman he discarded would walk into his perfect wedding with evidence that could bring down his entire criminal empire. This is the true story of how a wedding invitation designed to destroy one woman became the weapon she used to expose a multi-million-dollar fraud operation. It's about what happens when you push someone so far that they have nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. You're about to hear how Sarah Martinez turned her darkest moment into Derek Collins' worst nightmare. But I have to warn you, this story gets darker before the dawn breaks. Are you ready for a tale of betrayal, revenge, and ultimate justice that will keep you listening until the very last word? The alarm clock screamed at 4:30 a.m., the same relentless sound that had dragged Sarah Martinez from exhaustion for the past 18 months. Her cramped one-bedroom apartment felt smaller each morning, especially with two 4-year-old twins sleeping on the pull-out couch that doubled as their bedroom. Sarah rolled out of her mattress on the floor, careful not to wake Emma and Luke. The bags under her eyes had become permanent fixtures, dark shadows that no amount of concealer could hide anymore. She pulled on her Uber driver uniform, a wrinkled polo shirt that had seen better days, and grabbed her phone to check the morning surge pricing. 3 jobs, 3 different uniforms, 3 different versions of herself that she had to become each day just to keep the lights on. The drive to her first pickup took her through the wealthy districts of Austin, Texas, where mansions sat behind iron gates and perfectly manicured lawns. She tried not to look too closely at the houses that reminded her of the life she used to have, back when she was a corporate lawyer pulling down 6 figures and living in a penthouse downtown. That was before Derek Collins convinced her to quit her job to support his tech startup, before she poured her legal expertise into building his company's intellectual property foundation, before he kicked her out 3 weeks after she told him she was pregnant with twins. Her phone buzzed with a ride request. A businessman in a $1,000 suit climbed into her Honda Civic, barely acknowledging her existence as he barked orders into his Bluetooth headset. Sarah gripped the steering wheel tighter, remembering when she used to be the one making those calls, when she commanded respect in boardrooms across the city. By 8 a.m., she had dropped off her last passenger and rushed home to wake the twins. Emma and Luke were her anchors, their innocent smiles the only thing that kept her going when everything else felt impossible. They deserved better than this tiny apartment with its leaking ceiling and broken air conditioner. "Mommy, why do we have to eat cereal again?" Luke asked, pushing around the generic bran flakes in his bowl. "Because it's your favorite," Sarah lied, forcing brightness into her voice. The truth was that cereal was all she could afford this week. The child support that Derek was supposed to pay had stopped coming 6 months ago, and her lawyer said it would cost more to chase him legally than she would ever recover. After dropping the twins at their overcrowded daycare, Sarah changed into her retail uniform in the parking lot. 8 hours on her feet at a discount clothing store, smiling at customers who treated her like she was invisible. Her supervisor, barely 22 and fresh out of college, lectured her about attitude problems when Sarah dared to look tired during her shift. The lunch break gave her exactly 30 minutes to drive across town for her appointment at the bank. Sarah sat across from a loan officer who looked at her application with barely concealed disdain. "Mrs. Martinez, your credit score has dropped significantly since your divorce. 3 jobs sounds impressive, but your combined income is still below our minimum requirements for a car loan." "I just need something reliable to get to work," Sarah explained, hating how desperate she sounded. "My car is breaking down, and if I can't drive for Uber..." "I'm sorry, but we can't approve this application. Perhaps you could ask a family member to co-sign?" Sarah bit back the urge to laugh. Her mother, Elena, was living on Social Security and showing early signs of dementia. There was no one else to ask. No family members with good credit. No friends who could help. Derek had made sure of that during the divorce, poisoning their mutual friends against her, with carefully crafted lies about her mental stability. The afternoon retail shift dragged on endlessly. Sarah's feet screamed in her cheap shoes and her back ached from lifting boxes in the stockroom. When her manager announced mandatory overtime, she wanted to cry. She needed the money desperately, but it meant picking up the twins late again, which meant more disapproving looks from the daycare workers. By the time she got home at 7 p.m., Sarah had been awake for 14 hours. The twins were cranky and hungry, and she had exactly 45 minutes to feed them, get them bathed, and dash off to her third job tending bar at a dive restaurant downtown. "Mommy, you smell like that store," Emma said, wrinkling her nose at the chemical scent of cheap perfume and cleaning products that clung to Sarah's clothes. "I know, baby. Mommy has to work one more job tonight, and then we'll have the whole morning together tomorrow, okay?" But that was another lie. Tomorrow was Saturday, which meant double shifts at both the retail store and driving for Uber. There were no mornings together anymore. No afternoons at the park. No bedtime stories that weren't interrupted by exhaustion or worry about bills. The babysitter was a 16-year-old neighbor who charged $20 a night, money Sarah couldn't really afford, but had no choice but to spend. She kissed the twins goodbye and rushed to her car, praying it would start on the first try. The bar job was the worst of the three. Drunk men who thought buying a beer gave them the right to grab her, women who looked through her like she wasn't even human, and a manager who pocketed half the tips and dared anyone to complain. Sarah smiled and served drinks and cleaned up messes until 2 a.m., her feet bleeding in her shoes by the end of the shift. She pulled into her apartment complex at 2:30 in the morning, so exhausted she could barely see straight. Tomorrow she would do it all again, and the day after that, and the day after that, with no end in sight. The mailbox held the usual collection of final notices and rejection letters. But tonight there was something different. An expensive envelope, thick cream-colored paper with her name written in elegant calligraphy. Sarah's hands trembled as she recognized Derek's corporate letterhead embossed in gold at the top. Inside was a formal wedding invitation, printed on paper that probably cost more than she spent on groceries in a month. "Derek Collins and Madison Stone request the pleasure of your company at their wedding celebration." At the bottom, in Derek's unmistakable handwriting, someone had added a note. "Thought you'd want to see what success looks like." Sarah sank onto her apartment steps and stared at the invitation until the words blurred through her tears. Derek was getting married to Madison Stone, the Instagram influencer with millions of followers and a trust fund that could buy and sell Sarah's entire life 100 times over. The same Derek who had built his company on legal work Sarah had done for free, believing they were building a future together. The same Derek who had thrown her out when she needed him most, who had abandoned his own children, who had systematically destroyed her credit and her reputation during their divorce. And now he wanted her to come watch him celebrate his success. Their success. The success that should have been hers too. Sarah looked up at her apartment window, where she could see the babysitter watching television, while her children slept on the couch that was supposed to be temporary 2 years ago. She thought about her mother, Elena, whose medical bills were piling up while her memory slowly faded away. She thought about the 3 jobs that barely kept them afloat, the creditors calling every day, the future that seemed to shrink a little more with each passing month. For the first time in 18 months, Sarah Martinez felt something other than exhaustion and despair. She felt rage. Sarah barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Derek's smug face and Madison's perfect smile from their engagement photos that had been splashed across social media for months. By dawn, she was already awake when the twins stirred on their makeshift bed. "Mommy, you look sad," Emma said, crawling over to wrap her small arms around Sarah's neck. Sarah forced a smile and pulled both children close. "I'm okay, babies. Just tired." But she wasn't okay. The wedding invitation sat on her tiny kitchen table like a live grenade, impossible to ignore. Every time she glanced at it, she felt that familiar cocktail of rage and helplessness that had become her constant companion since the divorce. The morning routine was the same as always: cereal for breakfast, cartoons on the old television while Sarah got ready for work. The rushed drive to daycare where she signed them in with shaking hands. The daycare worker, Mrs. Chen, gave her a concerned look. "Sarah, honey, are you all right? You look like you haven't slept." "I'm fine," Sarah lied, kissing the twins goodbye. "I'll pick them up at the usual time." But as she drove toward her first job, Sarah's phone rang. The caller ID showed Derek's number, something she hadn't seen in months. Against her better judgment, she answered. "Hello, Sarah." His voice was exactly the same, smooth and confident with that undertone of condescension that used to make her feel small. I trust you received my invitation. What do you want, Derek? Just wanted to make sure you're planning to attend. Madison specifically requested that you be there. She's so excited to meet the infamous ex-wife. Sarah pulled over to the side of the road, her hands shaking with anger. Why would you do this? Haven't you hurt me enough? Hurt you? Derek's laugh was sharp and cold. Sarah, I gave you the best years of your life. It's not my fault you couldn't keep up when things got real. Some people are built for success, and others. He let the sentence hang in the air like a blade. Those are your children, Derek. Emma and Luke are your blood, and you act like they don't exist. Children from a failed relationship. Madison and I are planning our own family now. Real children, with a stable home, and two parents who actually love each other. The line went quiet except for Sarah's ragged breathing. Derek's cruelty still had the power to wind her, even after all this time. Anyway, he continued, Madison really wants you there. She has this theory that seeing you will help people understand how far I've come. Sort of a before and after situation, you know. The struggling single mom versus the successful entrepreneur's beautiful wife. You're sick. I'm successful. There's a difference. The wedding is next Saturday at the Four Seasons. Try to find something appropriate to wear. I'd hate for you to embarrass yourself. The call ended, leaving Sarah sitting in her car in stunned silence. She had thought Derek's capacity for cruelty had reached its limit during their divorce. She was wrong. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a text message from an unknown number. This is Madison. So excited to finally meet you at the wedding. Derek has told me so much about you. Can't wait to catch up. The message was followed by a string of heart emojis and a link to Madison's latest Instagram post. A photo of her enormous engagement ring with the caption, "Marrying my best friend and soulmate. Some people settle, but we were meant for greatness together." Sarah stared at the post and the thousands of comments from Madison's followers. They were all variations on the same theme. Congratulations, you're so lucky. Derek is such a catch. You two are perfect together. Not one person mentioned that Derek had abandoned two 4-year-old children. Not one comment asked about the ex-wife he had left destitute. In Madison's perfectly curated world, Sarah and the twins simply didn't exist. The retail shift that day was torture. Sarah's mind kept drifting back to the phone call, replaying Derek's words over and over. Her supervisor noticed her distraction and made her stay an extra hour to reorganize the stockroom as punishment. Whatever personal drama you're dealing with, leave it at home, the young woman snapped. This is a workplace, not therapy. Sarah bit her tongue and kept working. She needed this job no matter how humiliating it was. Every dollar counted, especially with Elena's medical bills piling up at home. After work, she drove to the assisted living facility where her mother lived in a small room that smelled like disinfectant and sadness. Elena was having one of her bad days, staring out the window with vacant eyes. Mom? Sarah sat down beside her and took her hand. How are you feeling today? Elena turned to look at her, confusion clouding her features. I'm sorry, dear, but who are you? Are you one of the new nurses? The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Yesterday, Elena had remembered her perfectly. They had talked about the twins, made plans for a weekend visit. Today, her own daughter was a stranger. I'm Sarah, Mom. Your daughter. Remember? Elena's brow furrowed with the effort of trying to remember. Sarah, yes, I had a daughter named Sarah, but she was a lawyer, a successful lawyer with a beautiful apartment. You're not her. Mom, it's me. I'm still me, just things have been hard lately. No, you're confused. My Sarah would never look so tired. She would never wear such cheap clothes. My Sarah was going to change the world. Sarah's heart broke a little more. Her mother's disease was stealing her memories, but it was also preserving an image of Sarah that no longer existed. In Elena's fading mind, her daughter was still the successful lawyer she had been before Derek destroyed everything. A nurse appeared in the doorway, clipboard in hand. Miss Martinez, could I speak with you privately? They stepped into the hallway, and Sarah knew what was coming before the nurse said a word. We haven't received this month's payment yet, and the billing department is asking questions. Your mother's insurance only covers so much, and the balance is quite substantial. Sarah looked at the invoice the nurse handed her. $4,800. More money than she made in 3 months. even working around the clock. How long can she stay if I don't pay immediately? The nurse's expression was sympathetic but firm. We can give you until the end of the month. After that, we'll have to discuss other arrangements. Other arrangements. Sarah knew what that meant. The state facility across town, where Elena would share a room with 3 other patients and receive minimal care. Where she would disappear into the system like thousands of other forgotten elderly people whose families couldn't afford to keep them safe. That evening, after another brutal shift at the bar, Sarah sat at her kitchen table and stared at Derek's wedding invitation. The expensive paper seemed to mock her with its elegant font and gold embossing. She thought about Madison's text message, so cheerful and innocent on the surface, but with an undercurrent of malice that made Sarah's skin crawl. She had 2 choices: ignore the invitation and let Derek claim victory by default, or show up and risk whatever humiliation they had planned for her. But as she looked around her tiny apartment, at the bills stacked on the counter and the mattress on the floor where she slept, Sarah realized she had nothing left to lose. Derek wanted to parade her in front of his wealthy friends as evidence of his success. Fine. She would go to his wedding, but she wouldn't go quietly. Monday morning brought an unexpected phone call that changed everything. Sarah was getting ready for her Uber shift when her phone rang with a number she hadn't seen in over 2 years. Sarah Martinez? This is Patricia Holloway from Brennan, Kessler and Associates. Sarah's heart skipped. Brennan Kessler was the law firm where she had worked before Derek convinced her to throw away her career. Patricia was the senior partner who had once called Sarah the most promising associate they'd ever hired. Patricia, this is unexpected. I imagine it is. Look, I'll cut right to the chase. We have a situation here, and frankly, we need someone with your particular expertise. Are you still practicing law? Sarah looked around her cramped apartment, at her Uber driver polo hanging on the door and her retail uniform in a wrinkled pile on the floor. Not exactly. Things have been complicated since my divorce. I heard about that. Derek Collins, right? Nasty piece of work, from what I understand. Listen, I know you've been out of the game for a while, but I remember what you were capable of. We have a class action case against a tech company that's been stealing user data. The legal framework is similar to some of the IP work you used to do. Sarah's pulse quickened. What are you offering? Junior associate position to start, but with partnership track if you can prove you've still got it. The salary is $60,000 to start, with bonuses based on billable hours. Health insurance, dental, the works. $60,000. More than Sarah currently made working 3 jobs and destroying her body 18 hours a day. More than enough to keep Elena in good care and move the twins into a real bedroom. Yes, I'm interested. When can we meet? How about this afternoon? 2 o'clock? Sarah looked at her work schedule. She was supposed to be at the retail store in 3 hours, and she had bar shifts every night this week. But this was the chance she had been praying for, the lifeline she desperately needed. I'll be there. After hanging up, Sarah stood in her apartment, feeling like she could breathe properly for the first time in months. She called in sick to her retail job, ignoring her supervisor's angry complaints about short notice. The bar manager wasn't happy either, but Sarah promised to pick up extra shifts later in the week to make up for it. The twins were confused when she picked them up early from daycare. Are we in trouble? Luke asked, his big brown eyes worried. No, baby. Mommy might have some good news, and I wanted to spend the afternoon with you 2 while I figure things out. They went to the park, something they hadn't done in months. Sarah pushed them on the swings and watched them chase each other across the playground, their laughter filling a hole in her chest she hadn't realized was there. For a few hours, she allowed herself to imagine a different life, a life where she could afford to take them to parks and museums, where she could read them bedtime stories without falling asleep from exhaustion. At 2 o'clock sharp, Sarah walked into the marble lobby of Brennan, Kessler and Associates, wearing the only professional outfit she still owned, a black suit that was slightly too loose from all the weight she'd lost. Patricia Holloway looked exactly the same, silver hair pulled back in a perfect chignon, designer glasses, an expression that suggested she could dismantle opposing counsel with surgical precision. Sarah, Patricia stood and shook her hand firmly. You look different. It's been a difficult few years. I imagine so. Please sit down. Let me explain what we're dealing with. The case was complex, involving a social media company that had been harvesting personal data and selling it to third parties without user consent. The legal challenges were significant, but Sarah found herself following the details easily, her mind clicking back into the analytical mode she'd thought she'd lost forever. The technical aspects are where we need you, Patricia explained. Most of our associates understand contract law, but you have that rare combination of legal expertise and tech industry knowledge. Your background with Collins Tech could actually be an advantage here. Sarah's stomach tightened at the mention of Derek's company. How so? Similar technology, similar data collection methods. You understand how these companies operate from the inside. They talked for another hour, diving into the specifics of discovery protocols and technical depositions. Sarah felt her confidence growing with each question she answered correctly, each legal concept that came back to her like muscle memory. I'll be honest with you, Sarah. This isn't charity. We need someone who can hit the ground running, and we need them immediately. But I remember what you were capable of before your personal situation changed. Are you ready to get back in the game? Sarah thought about Derek's wedding invitation, about the condescending phone call, and Madison's fake sweet text message. She thought about the 3 jobs that were slowly killing her, about Elena's medical bills, about the twins sleeping on a pull-out couch. I'm ready. Patricia smiled for the first time since Sarah had arrived. Excellent. You can start Monday. We'll need you to hit the ground running, but I have faith in your abilities. Walking out of that office, Sarah felt lighter than she had in 2 years. She called the babysitter and asked her to watch the twins for a few extra hours, then drove to the mall for the first time since her divorce. She had exactly $200 in her checking account, money she had been saving for Elena's care, but she needed something appropriate for Derek's wedding. The department stores were full of clothes she couldn't afford, designer dresses that cost more than she made in a month. But in the clearance section of a mid-tier store, she found a navy blue dress that fit perfectly and only cost $79. It wasn't glamorous, but it was respectable, professional. At home that evening, she tried on the dress and looked at herself in the mirror. For the first time in months, she didn't see a desperate woman hanging on by her fingernails. She saw someone with potential again, someone with a future. The twins loved the dress, clapping their hands and telling her she looked like a princess. Sarah laughed and spun around, feeling almost giddy with relief. Everything was going to be okay. She had a job, a real job that would let her provide for her family properly. She would go to Derek's wedding with her head held high, knowing that his attempt to humiliate her had backfired spectacularly. That night, she called her mother to share the good news. "Mom, it's Sarah. I have something wonderful to tell you." "Sarah!" Elena's voice was clear and bright, one of her good days. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm so glad you called. How are my grandbabies?" "They're perfect, Mom. And I got a job offer today, a real job at a law firm. I start Monday." "Oh, darling, that's wonderful. I'm so proud of you. I knew you'd find your way back." They talked for 20 minutes, making plans for Elena to have dinner with them once Sarah got her first paycheck and could afford a nicer apartment. Elena was lucid and loving, the mother Sarah remembered from before the disease started stealing her memories. After hanging up, Sarah sat at her kitchen table and pulled out Derek's wedding invitation. She traced the elegant lettering with her finger, no longer feeling the sharp stab of humiliation it had caused a week ago. Let Derek and Madison have their moment. Let them parade her in front of their wealthy friends, if that's what they needed to feel superior. She would smile and be gracious, and when people asked what she was doing with her life, she would tell them about her new position at Brennan, Kessler and Associates. For the first time since her divorce, Sarah Martinez felt like she was winning. But as she drifted off to sleep that night, she had no way of knowing that her newfound hope was about to be destroyed in the cruelest way possible. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of brilliant Texas sunshine that made everything look possible. Sarah woke up feeling genuinely optimistic for the first time in months, her navy dress hanging carefully in the tiny closet, her hair appointment as scheduled for noon. The twins were excited about spending the day with their babysitter, chattering about the movies they planned to watch and the games they wanted to play. Sarah kissed them goodbye, promising to bring them back leftovers from the fancy reception. You look pretty, Mommy, Emma said, hugging her tight. Thank you, baby. I'll be back tonight with stories about the princess party. Sarah's appointment at the discount salon didn't transform her into a magazine cover model, but the stylist managed to tame her unruly curls into an elegant updo. In the bathroom mirror, wearing her navy dress and with her hair properly styled, Sarah looked like the professional woman she was about to become again. The Four Seasons Hotel was exactly the kind of venue Derek would choose: ostentatious, expensive, and designed to impress people who measured worth by the number of zeros in your bank account. Valet attendants in white gloves took keys from guests emerging from luxury cars worth more than Sarah's annual income. Sarah parked her Honda Civic in the self-parking garage and walked through the marble lobby, trying to project confidence she didn't quite feel. The wedding was being held in the grand ballroom, and even from the hallway, she could hear the sounds of wealth, crystal glasses clinking, refined laughter, a string quartet playing something classical and pretentious. She paused at the entrance, smoothing her dress and checking her reflection in a mirrored wall. You belong here, she told herself. You're not the desperate woman Derek thinks you are anymore. You have a job, a future, a reason to hold your head high. The ballroom was a monument to excess. Thousands of white orchids draped every surface. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow patterns across silk tablecloths, and a 12-piece orchestra played from a raised platform. The guest list read like a who's who of Austin's social elite: tech executives, politicians, socialites, and influencers, all dressed in clothes that cost more than most people's rent. Sarah recognized several faces from Derek's social media posts, people who used to be their mutual friends before the divorce. They looked at her with barely concealed surprise, whispering behind champagne flutes about how different she looked, how tired she seemed. Sarah Martinez. A familiar voice made her turn around. It was Jonathan Webb, Derek's former business partner, looking uncomfortable in his expensive tuxedo. I wasn't sure you'd actually come. Why wouldn't I? Derek is the father of my children. Jonathan glanced around nervously. Listen, I don't know what Derek told you about today, but maybe you should consider leaving. This might not be comfortable for you. Before Sarah could ask what he meant, the orchestra struck up the wedding march. The ceremony was about to begin. Derek looked exactly like what he was, a man who had won at life. His custom tuxedo probably cost more than Sarah's monthly rent. His smile was confident and satisfied, and when Madison appeared at the other end of the aisle, even Sarah had to admit they looked like a perfect couple. Madison Stone was everything Sarah wasn't: tall, blonde, effortlessly elegant in a dress that undoubtedly cost more than Sarah's car. Her smile was radiant as she glided down the aisle, her professional photographer capturing every angle of her perfect moment. The ceremony itself was mercifully brief. Traditional vows spoken with television-ready sincerity, rings exchanged with practiced precision, a kiss that generated applause and camera flashes from the assembled crowd. But as the newly married couple turned to face their guests, Derek's eyes found Sarah in the crowd. His smile changed, became sharper, more predatory. He whispered something to Madison, who turned to look at Sarah with bright, curious eyes. During cocktail hour, Sarah tried to blend into the background, nursing a single glass of wine and making small talk with other guests. Most conversations died quickly when people realized who she was. A few women she had once considered friends offered polite but distant greetings before excusing themselves to talk to more interesting people. You must be Sarah. Madison appeared beside her like a vision in silk and diamonds, her smile so perfectly crafted it could have been painted on. I'm so glad you decided to come. Derek wasn't sure you would. Congratulations on your wedding. You look beautiful. Thank you. You know, Derek has told me so much about you, about your situation. It must be so hard working all those jobs just to make ends meet. The words were delivered with such sweet concern that it took Sarah a moment to realize she'd been insulted. Madison's smile never wavered, but her eyes were calculating, measuring Sarah's reaction. I'm actually starting a new job Monday, at Brennan Kessler and Associates. It's a law firm. Oh, how nice. Derek mentioned you used to be a lawyer. It's so brave of you to try again after everything that happened. Sarah felt a familiar hot flush of shame creeping up her neck. Somehow Madison had managed to make her job offer sound like a charity case, a pity position given to someone who couldn't succeed on their own merit. "If you'll excuse me," Sarah said, trying to escape before Madison could inflict any more damage. But Madison wasn't finished. "Actually, there's something I wanted to discuss with you. About Emma and Luke." Sarah's blood went cold. "What about my children?" "Oh, they're darling. I've seen the photos Derek showed me. But I can't help wondering if they're really in the best environment right now. I mean, with you working so much and living in such a small space." "My children are fine. I'm sure you're doing your best. But Derek and I have been talking about the future, about starting our own family, and we wondered if maybe it would be better for Emma and Luke to have more stability. You know, a two-parent household, financial security, educational opportunities." The implication hit Sarah like a physical blow. Madison was talking about custody, about taking her children away. "They already have a mother," Sarah said, her voice barely steady. "Of course they do. I'm not trying to replace you. I'm just thinking about what's best for them. Derek is their father, after all. And now that he's financially stable and married." Madison let the sentence hang in the air like a threat. Around them, the party continued, but Sarah felt like she was drowning in the middle of a crowded room. "Excuse me," she managed, pushing through the crowd toward the ladies' room. In the marble bathroom, Sarah gripped the edge of the sink and tried to breathe. Madison's words echoed in her head. Financial stability, two-parent household, what's best for the children. All the arguments Derek's lawyers had tried to use during the divorce, but now with the backing of a wealthy married stepmother. When she returned to the ballroom, dinner was being served. Sarah found her assigned seat at a table near the back of the room, surrounded by people she didn't recognize. The couple next to her were deep in conversation about their upcoming vacation to Europe, completely ignoring her existence. Derek's speech came during the main course. He stood at the head table, champagne glass raised, looking every inch the successful businessman celebrating his triumph. "I want to thank everyone for sharing this special day with Madison and me," he began, his voice carrying easily across the ballroom. "You know, they say that every ending is a new beginning. Sometimes we have to close one chapter of our lives to open another, better one." His eyes found Sarah in the crowd, and his smile became cruel. "I'm grateful for the lessons I learned from my past mistakes. They taught me what real love looks like, what a true partnership should be. Madison has shown me what it means to have someone who elevates you, who makes you want to be better, rather than someone who drains your energy and holds you back." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Everyone knew he was talking about Sarah. Phones came out as guests started recording, sensing drama unfolding in real time. "So here's to new beginnings," Derek continued, raising his glass higher, "to leaving the past where it belongs, and to building a future with someone who actually deserves your success." The applause was scattered and uncomfortable. Sarah felt every eye in the room on her, felt the humiliation burning through her chest like acid. This was Derek's plan all along, not just to invite her, but to destroy her publicly, to make sure everyone knew exactly what he thought of the mother of his children. Her phone buzzed with notifications. People were already posting videos of Derek's speech to social media, tagging her in posts that would follow her forever. The comments were brutal, awkward, so savage. "She looks like she wants to disappear. Poor girl, that had to hurt." Sarah's hands shook as she set down her untouched dinner fork. She had walked into Derek's trap exactly as he had planned, and now she was bleeding out in front of 300 witnesses. But the worst was yet to come. As dessert was being served, Sarah's phone rang. The caller ID showed Elena's assisted living facility. "Miss Martinez, this is Nancy from Sunset Manor. I'm sorry to bother you on a Saturday evening, but there's been an incident with your mother." Sarah's heart stopped. "What kind of incident?" "She became agitated this afternoon and tried to leave the facility. When the staff tried to redirect her, she fell and hit her head. She's at Austin General Hospital now." "Is she okay?" "She's stable, but the doctors want to keep her for observation. There's also something else we need to discuss. During the confusion, your mother mentioned some things about feeling unsafe here, and unfortunately, someone called Adult Protective Services." The words barely registered through Sarah's panic. "I'll be right there." She grabbed her purse and pushed through the crowd toward the exit, desperate to get to her mother. Behind her, the party continued, Derek's laughter echoing off the marble walls as his guests celebrated his perfect new life. Sarah had thought she was attending a wedding. Instead, she had walked into an execution, and Derek had just fired the killing shot. The hospital waiting room smelled like disinfectant and despair. Sarah sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair, still wearing her navy wedding dress, watching the clock tick past midnight. Elena had been admitted 4 hours ago, and the doctors were still running tests to determine the extent of her head injury. "Miss Martinez?" A tired-looking resident in scrubs approached her. "Your mother is awake and asking for you. She has a concussion, but the CT scan shows no serious bleeding. We want to keep her overnight for observation." Sarah followed the doctor through sterile corridors to Elena's room. Her mother looked small and fragile in the hospital bed, a bandage wrapped around her forehead, her eyes confused and frightened. "Mom, it's me, Sarah." Elena turned toward her voice, squinting in the harsh fluorescent light. "Sarah, what are you doing here? Where am I?" "You're in the hospital, Mom. You fell at Sunset Manor, remember?" "Sunset Manor?" Elena's brow furrowed with the effort of remembering. "I don't live there. I live in my house on Maple Street with your father. Why would you say I live in that place?" Sarah's heart broke a little more. Elena's house on Maple Street had been sold 3 years ago to pay for her care, and Sarah's father had died when she was 12. The dementia was getting worse, stealing more of her mother's memories each week. "Mom, you've been at Sunset Manor for 2 years now. Dad passed away a long time ago, remember?" Elena's eyes filled with tears of confusion and fear. "No, that's not right. You're lying to me. Why would you lie to me?" A social worker appeared in the doorway, clipboard in hand. "Miss Martinez, I'm Janet Coleman from Adult Protective Services. I need to speak with you about your mother's living situation." Sarah's stomach dropped. She had forgotten about the APS call in her rush to get to the hospital. "What about it?" "Your mother was quite agitated when the paramedics arrived. She claimed that people at Sunset Manor were trying to hurt her, that she was being held against her will. These are serious allegations that we're required to investigate." "She has dementia," Sarah explained desperately. "She gets confused, especially when she's scared or disoriented. The staff at Sunset Manor are wonderful." "I'm sure they are, but we have protocols to follow. I've also been informed that there are outstanding payments for your mother's care, which raises questions about the adequacy of her current placement." Sarah felt the walls closing in around her. "I'm working on the payment situation. I just got a new job and I'll be able to catch up on the bills." Janet Coleman's expression was professionally sympathetic but firm. "Miss Martinez, I've reviewed your mother's file. This isn't the first time there have been payment issues. Adult Protective Services has a responsibility to ensure that elderly residents receive appropriate care, and that includes making sure their families can afford that care." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we need to explore alternative living arrangements for your mother. There are state-funded facilities that might be more appropriate given your financial circumstances." State-funded facilities. The kind of places where Elena would share a room with 3 other patients, where the staff was overworked and underpaid, where residents sat in wheelchairs staring at television screens until they died. "Please," Sarah begged, "give me 1 week. I start my new job Monday, and I'll have the money for her care. She's happy at Sunset Manor, and the staff knows how to handle her condition." "I understand your concerns, Miss Martinez, but my primary obligation is to your mother's well-being. I'll need to conduct a full evaluation of her current situation before making any recommendations." The social worker left, promising to return Monday morning with the evaluation team. Sarah sat beside Elena's bed, holding her mother's hand while she drifted in and out of confused sleep. At 3 a.m., Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Hope your mom is okay. Heard about the hospital visit. Such a shame when family members can't provide proper care. XOXO." The message was unsigned, but Sarah knew it was from Madison. Somehow Derek's new wife had already found out about Elena's accident and was twisting the knife deeper. Sarah's hand shook as she typed a response. "Stay away from my family." The reply came immediately. "We are family now, sweetie. Derek's children deserve to know their grandmother is safe. Speaking of which, we should probably discuss custody arrangements soon." I'm sure Emma and Luke would love spending time with us in our beautiful home instead of that tiny apartment. Sarah stared at the message until the words blurred. Madison wasn't just threatening to take her children. She was orchestrating a systematic destruction of Sarah's entire life. First, the public humiliation at the wedding, now the APS investigation, and next would come the custody battle. By morning, Sarah was exhausted and frantic. Elena was being discharged to Sunset Manor, but Janet Coleman had made it clear that the evaluation would determine whether she could stay there. Sarah called Patricia Holloway, hoping her new boss would understand the emergency. "Sarah, what's wrong? You sound terrible." "My mother had an accident last night, and there's been a complication with Adult Protective Services. I know I'm supposed to start tomorrow, but I need to handle this family crisis first." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Sarah, I'm sympathetic to your situation. Truly I am. But this case is moving fast, and we need someone who can be completely focused on the work. If you're dealing with family emergencies and social services investigations, it's just temporary. Once my mother's situation is resolved, I'll be completely available." "I'm sure you would, but we can't afford any delays or distractions right now. Perhaps we should postpone your start date until your personal matters are settled." Sarah felt her lifeline slipping away. "Patricia, please. I need this job. My family depends on it. Call me when your situation is resolved, and we'll see if the position is still available." The line went dead, leaving Sarah staring at her phone in disbelief. In less than 24 hours, she had lost her job, her mother's care was in jeopardy, and Madison was circling like a vulture, waiting to claim her children. She drove home in a daze, still wearing her wedding dress from the night before. The twins were awake when she arrived, playing quietly with their toys while the babysitter watched morning cartoons. "Mommy!" Emma ran to hug her. "You look sad. Was the princess party not fun?" Sarah knelt down and pulled both children into her arms, breathing in their innocent sweetness. They smelled like baby shampoo and hope, like everything good in her world that was slowly being taken away. "It was fine, baby. Mommy just had a long night." But it wasn't fine. Nothing was fine. Derek had outmaneuvered her at every turn, and now she was exactly where he wanted her. Desperate, isolated, and completely powerless to protect the people she loved most. Later that afternoon, while the twins napped, Sarah's phone rang with another unknown number. "Sarah Martinez? This is Rebecca Torres from Child Protective Services. We've received a report expressing concerns about the welfare of Emma and Luke Collins." Sarah's blood turned to ice. "What kind of concerns?" "The report alleges inadequate living conditions, financial instability, and neglect due to excessive work hours. We're required to investigate any claims involving child welfare. I'll need to schedule a home visit to assess the children's living situation." "Who filed this report?" "I can't reveal the source of the complaint, but we take all reports seriously. Are you available for a home visit tomorrow afternoon?" Sarah looked around her tiny apartment. The mattress on the floor, the pull-out couch where her children slept, the bills stacked on the kitchen counter, the empty refrigerator she couldn't afford to fill. "Yes," she whispered, "I'll be here." After hanging up, Sarah sat on her kitchen floor and cried. Derek and Madison had declared war on her, and they were winning every battle. They had the money, the connections, the social media platform to destroy her reputation, and now they were using the system itself as a weapon against her. For the first time since her divorce, Sarah wondered if maybe they were right. Maybe Emma and Luke would be better off with their father and his wealthy new wife. Maybe she was being selfish by fighting for custody when she could barely provide for them. But then Luke toddled out of the bedroom, rubbing his sleepy eyes, and climbed into her lap. "Mommy crying?" he asked, patting her face with his small hands. "Just a little, baby, but I'm okay." "I make you feel better," he said, kissing her cheek with innocent sweetness. Sarah held him tight, feeling his tiny heart beating against her chest. These were her children, her babies, the only good thing that had ever come from her marriage to Derek. She would fight for them with everything she had, even if it destroyed her in the process. But as she sat on the floor of her failing apartment, holding her son while the walls of her life crumbled around her, Sarah had no idea that the worst betrayal was yet to come. Monday morning brought no relief, only a deeper descent into the nightmare Sarah's life had become. She woke before dawn on the mattress on the floor. her body aching from stress and sleepless nights, her mind racing through all the ways Derek and Madison were systematically destroying her. The twins were cranky and confused by the disruption to their routine. Emma kept asking why Mommy looked so sad, while Luke clung to Sarah's leg whenever she tried to move around the apartment. "We need to clean up the house today," Sarah told them, trying to inject some cheer into her voice. "Someone is coming to visit this afternoon, and we want everything to look nice." But how do you make a one-bedroom apartment with peeling wallpaper and broken appliances look like a suitable home for children? How do you explain to a social worker that love can make up for the lack of money, that stability comes from a mother's devotion rather than the size of a house? Sarah spent the morning frantically cleaning, hiding bills in drawers, pushing the twins' toys into neat piles that looked intentional rather than desperate. She borrowed $20 from the emergency fund hidden in her sock drawer and bought groceries to fill the empty refrigerator, praying that whoever came to inspect would see a functioning household rather than a family hanging on by threads. At noon, her phone rang. Patricia Holloway's number appeared on the screen, and for a moment, Sarah dared to hope that her job offer might be reinstated. "Sarah, I hope you've resolved your family situation because I have some unexpected news about the position." "Yes, everything is much better now," Sarah lied smoothly. "I'm completely available to start work." "Well, that's the thing. We've had a development with the case that changes our staffing needs. It turns out the defendant company has hired Derek Collins as a consultant. His expertise in tech industry practices makes him a valuable asset to their defense team." Sarah's world tilted sideways. "Derek is working for the company you're suing?" It's not unusual for these corporate cases to involve overlapping professional relationships, but given your personal history with Mr. Collins, the partners feel it would be inappropriate to have you on the prosecution team. It creates too many potential conflicts of interest. "Patricia, Derek hasn't been involved in my life for 2 years. I'm perfectly capable of maintaining professional boundaries." "I'm sure you are, but the partners have made their decision." "I'm sorry, Sarah, but we're going to have to withdraw our job offer." "Oh." The call ended, leaving Sarah staring at her phone in disbelief. Derek hadn't just taken her job away. He had orchestrated it, probably as soon as he learned about her interview last week. He had used his industry connections to poison her opportunity before it even began. At 2 o'clock, Rebecca Torres arrived for the home inspection. She was a tired-looking woman in her 40s, carrying a clipboard and wearing the kind of expression that suggested she'd seen too much misery in her career. "Miss Martinez? I'm here about Emma and Luke Collins." Sarah noticed that the social worker used Derek's last name for the children, not hers. Another small but deliberate cut, a reminder that in the eyes of the system, she was just the custodial parent, not the real authority figure. "Please come in. The children are napping right now, but you're welcome to look around." Rebecca walked through the tiny apartment with professional efficiency, making notes on her clipboard. Sarah watched her catalog every flaw: the cramped living space, the makeshift bedroom setup, the cheap furniture and worn carpet. "How long have you been living here?" "About 18 months, since my divorce was finalized." "And your current employment situation?" Sarah hesitated, knowing that honesty would probably doom her, but unable to think of a convincing lie. "I've been working multiple part-time jobs, but I'm actively looking for more stable employment." "What kind of part-time jobs?" "Uber driver, retail sales, and bartending." Rebecca made more notes, her expression carefully neutral. "Those are all jobs that require you to be away from home for extended periods. Who cares for the children while you're working?" "A babysitter, a very responsible teenager from the neighborhood." "How many hours per week are the children in someone else's care?" Sarah did the math in her head and felt sick. Between her 3 jobs, Emma and Luke were with babysitters or at daycare nearly 60 hours per week. "It varies, but I'm always available if they need me." The twins woke up during the middle of the inspection, emerging from the main room with sleepy eyes and confused expressions. Rebecca knelt down to their level with practiced kindness. "Hi there. I'm Rebecca. What are your names?" "Emma," said Emma shyly, hiding behind Sarah's legs. "Luke," said Luke more boldly. "Are you a friend of Mommy's?" "I'm someone who wants to make sure you're happy and healthy. Do you like living here with your mom?" Both children nodded enthusiastically, but Sarah could see Rebecca noting their responses, probably interpreting their attachment to her as evidence of inadequate socialization or overdependence. After the children returned to playing, Rebecca continued her questions. The complaint we received mentioned financial instability and inadequate living conditions. Can you tell me about your income and expenses? Sarah pulled out her bank statements, knowing they painted a picture of constant struggle. Rebecca reviewed them with the same professional detachment she'd shown to everything else. Your rent is more than half your monthly income. That's well above recommended financial guidelines. I know it's tight, but we manage. The children have everything they need. What about their father? Does he provide support? Child support payments have been irregular lately. Rebecca made another note. Have you pursued legal remedies for non-payment? I can't afford to hire a lawyer to chase him, and he knows it. The interview continued for another hour, covering everything from the children's medical care to their educational plans to Sarah's own mental health. By the end, Sarah felt like she'd been dissected by a bureaucratic surgeon who found nothing but failures and inadequacies. Miss Martinez, I want to be clear that my role is to assess what's best for Emma and Luke. I'm not here to judge you as a person or a mother. But I am concerned about the stability of their current living situation. Working 60 hours a week at 3 different jobs while caring for 2 young children is unsustainable. The financial pressure, the cramped living space, the irregular schedule, these factors create an environment that may not be conducive to healthy child development. Sarah felt panic rising in her chest. What does that mean exactly? It means I'll be recommending a full custody evaluation. The court will need to determine whether the current arrangement serves the children's best interests. And what about their father? Are you investigating his fitness as a parent too? Rebecca's expression became carefully neutral. Mr. Collins has recently married and established a stable household. His financial situation appears to be secure, and his new wife has expressed interest in being involved in the children's lives. Of course, Madison had been in contact with CPS. Of course, Derek's wealth and new marriage made him look like the ideal parent compared to Sarah's obvious struggles. After Rebecca left, Sarah collapsed onto her couch and stared at the ceiling. In 3 days, she had lost her job, her mother's care was in jeopardy, and now her children were at risk of being taken away. Derek and Madison had executed a perfect campaign of destruction, using the legal system as their weapon and Sarah's own circumstances against her. That evening, her phone buzzed with another text from Madison. Hope the home visit went well today. Derek and I have been thinking about the twins so much. We have such a beautiful playroom set up in our house, and the private school district here is supposed to be excellent. Can't wait for them to see their new home. Go EXO. Sarah stared at the message, her hands shaking with rage and helplessness. Madison wasn't even pretending to hide her intentions anymore. She was rubbing Sarah's face in her defeat, confident that the legal system would deliver the children directly into her manicured hands. But as Sarah looked at Emma and Luke playing innocently with their worn toys on the threadbare carpet, she made a silent promise. She would fight for them until her last breath, even if it meant sacrificing everything else she had left. She had no way of knowing that someone was watching from the shadows, someone who would soon offer her a lifeline that seemed too good to be true. Because the most devastating betrayal was still to come. Tuesday morning brought an unexpected visitor to Sarah's door. She was getting ready for another day of frantic job hunting when the knock interrupted her preparations. Through the peephole, she saw a tall man in an expensive suit, someone she didn't recognize but who carried himself with the confidence that came from serious money. Miss Martinez, my name is James Rothschild. I'd like to speak with you about your situation, if you have a few minutes. The name was vaguely familiar, something she'd heard in business circles when she was still practicing law. Sarah opened the door cautiously, keeping the security chain engaged. What situation would that be? Your custody battle with Derek Collins. May I come in? I think I can help. Against her better judgment, Sarah let him into her apartment. James Rothschild was in his early 40s, impeccably dressed, with the kind of quiet authority that suggested he was accustomed to getting his way. He looked around her tiny living space without judgment, his expression professionally neutral. I apologize for arriving unannounced, but I wanted to speak with you before my involvement became public knowledge. What involvement? James sat down across from her, his manner serious but sympathetic. I knew your father, Miss Martinez, Staff Sergeant Miguel Martinez, killed in Afghanistan in 2001. Sarah's breath caught. Her father had died when she was 12, and she rarely talked about him with anyone. The fact that this stranger knew those details immediately put her on guard. How did you know my father? I was a young lieutenant in his unit. Miguel was a good man, a good soldier. He saved my life during an ambush outside Kandahar. I've always felt that I owed him a debt I could never repay. Sarah studied James's face, looking for signs of deception, but his expression remained sincere, almost pained when he spoke about her father. When I learned that Derek Collins was trying to take custody of Miguel's grandchildren, I knew I had to intervene. No daughter of Miguel Martinez should have to fight this battle alone. How did you even know about the custody case? I have connections in the legal community. Word travels fast when high-profile divorces involve child welfare issues. James leaned forward, his voice earnest. Sarah, I want to help you. I have the resources to hire the best custody lawyers in the state to make sure Emma and Luke stay where they belong. Sarah's heart began to race. After 3 days of watching her life crumble, someone was finally offering her hope. But years of disappointment had taught her to be cautious about gifts that seemed too generous. What would you want in return? Nothing. This is about honoring your father's memory and making sure his grandchildren are protected. I don't understand. You don't even know me. James smiled sadly. Miguel talked about you constantly. He showed everyone pictures of his brilliant daughter who was going to be a lawyer, who was going to change the world. He was so proud of you, Sarah. If he were alive today, he'd be fighting Derek Collins with everything he had. Tears stung Sarah's eyes at the mention of her father's pride. Miguel Martinez had died before he could see her graduate from law school, before he could walk her down the aisle at her wedding, before he could meet his grandchildren. But somehow this stranger had known him well enough to remember his dreams for her. The custody hearing is scheduled for next week, James continued. Derek's lawyers are going to argue that you're an unfit mother based on your living situation and work schedule. But we can fight back. I know lawyers who specialize in these cases, people who understand that love and stability aren't measured by bank account balances. Sarah wiped her eyes, trying to process what was happening. Why would you do this for someone you've never met? Because 18 years ago, your father threw himself on a grenade that was meant for me and 4 other soldiers. Because he died saving lives, and because his sacrifice gave me the chance to build the life I have now. This is my opportunity to repay that debt. For the first time in days, Sarah felt something other than despair. What would you need from me? Just your permission to hire legal representation on your behalf. I'll handle all the costs, all the logistics. You focus on being the best mother you can be to those children. Sarah looked around her tiny apartment, at the bills stacked on the counter and the cheap furniture that was falling apart. She thought about Rebecca Torres's clipboard and Madison's threatening text messages and Derek's smug confidence that he would win because he always won. Yes, she said quietly. Please help me. James smiled and shook her hand firmly. You're not alone anymore, Sarah. We're going to fight this, and we're going to win. Over the next few days, James proved to be exactly what he promised. A team of lawyers appeared at Sarah's door with contracts and strategies, all funded by James's apparently limitless resources. They were professional, experienced, and confident in their ability to keep Emma and Luke with their mother. The lead attorney was a woman named Catherine Price, who specialized in high-stakes custody battles. She met with Sarah for hours, preparing her for depositions and court appearances, coaching her on how to present herself as a capable parent despite her financial struggles. The key is to focus on stability and love, Catherine explained. Yes, you're working multiple jobs, but that demonstrates dedication and work ethic. Yes, your apartment is small, but it's clean and safe. Derek's lawyers will try to make this about money, but we're going to make it about what really matters, the children's emotional well-being. James also arranged for character witnesses, people from Sarah's past who could testify to her integrity and parenting abilities. He hired a social worker to conduct an independent evaluation of Sarah's home, someone who wouldn't be influenced by Derek's connections or Madison's manipulations. For the first time since the wedding disaster, Sarah began to feel hopeful. She had a team of professionals working on her behalf, resources that matched Derek's wealth and influence. Maybe she could actually win this battle. James checked in with her regularly, always professional but increasingly personal in their conversations. He brought gifts for the twins, expensive toys that made their eyes light up with wonder. He took Sarah to dinner at upscale restaurants where they discussed strategy and shared stories about their past. You know, he said over wine at an elegant steakhouse, Miguel would be so proud of the woman you've become. Despite everything Derek put you through, you never gave up on your children. I don't feel very strong most days, Sarah admitted. I feel like I'm barely holding everything together. That's exactly what strength looks like. Not the absence of fear or struggle, but continuing to fight despite them. James was charming, intelligent, and seemed genuinely invested in her well-being. When he offered to help her find a new job after the custody case was resolved, Sarah began to wonder if maybe her luck was finally changing. Maybe her father really was watching over her, sending help when she needed it most. But late at night, when she was alone with her thoughts, small doubts crept in. How had James learned about her custody battle so quickly? Why was he so willing to spend what must be hundreds of thousands of dollars on someone he'd never met? And why did some of his stories about her father feel just slightly off, as if he'd researched Miguel Martinez rather than actually knowing him? Sarah pushed these concerns aside, telling herself she was being paranoid after months of Derek's psychological warfare. James was offering her a chance to save her children, and she couldn't afford to question miracles. But as the custody hearing approached, she had no idea that her savior was actually her executioner, and that the trap being set for her was more elaborate and cruel than anything Derek could have devised on his own. The man she trusted to save her family was about to destroy them all. The custody hearing was scheduled for Thursday morning in family court, a sterile building that smelled like fear and broken promises. Sarah arrived early, dressed in her best professional attire, flanked by Catherine Price and two other attorneys from James's legal team. Derek and Madison sat across the courtroom with their own legal representation, an intimidating group led by one of Austin's most ruthless family law specialists. Madison wore a conservative navy dress and minimal makeup, playing the role of concerned stepmother perfectly. Judge Harrison was a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and an expression that suggested she'd seen every type of family dysfunction imaginable. She reviewed the case files with methodical precision before calling the hearing to order. This is a custody modification hearing for Emma Collins and Luke Collins, currently in the primary custody of their mother, Sarah Martinez. The petitioner, Derek Collins, is requesting full custody based on allegations of inadequate living conditions and financial instability. Derek's lawyer stood up first, a sharp-featured man named Richard Blackwood, who spoke with the confidence of someone who rarely lost. Your Honor, my client is deeply concerned about the welfare of his children. Miss Martinez is currently unemployed, living in substandard housing, and unable to provide the stability that Emma and Luke need for healthy development. He presented evidence methodically, photographs of Sarah's cramped apartment, bank statements showing her financial struggles, testimony from the CPS social worker who had conducted the home visit. Each piece of evidence was technically accurate, but presented in the most damaging light possible. Furthermore, Blackwood continued, my client has recently married Madison Stone Collins, a woman who has expressed genuine interest in providing a loving home for these children. Mr. Collins now owns a 4-bedroom house in the prestigious Westlake district, with excellent schools and ample space for the children to thrive. Sarah watched the judge's expression during Derek's presentation, trying to gauge her reaction. Judge Harrison remained professionally neutral, but Sarah could see her making notes as each piece of evidence was presented. Catherine Price stood up for Sarah's defense, and for the first few minutes, everything went according to plan. She presented character witnesses who testified to Sarah's dedication as a mother, expert testimony about the importance of maintaining primary caregiver relationships, and evidence of Derek's own failures as a parent. Your Honor, Mr. Collins abandoned these children when they were infants. He has provided no emotional or financial support for the past 2 years. Now suddenly he claims to want custody not because he loves them, but because his new wife wants to play house with someone else's children. Catherine was compelling and professional, methodically dismantling Derek's case piece by piece. Sarah began to feel cautiously optimistic as several of Derek's witnesses stumbled under cross-examination. But then Richard Blackwood called an unexpected witness. Your Honor, I'd like to call James Rothschild to the stand. Sarah's blood went cold. James wasn't supposed to testify. He was funding her legal defense, not providing testimony for Derek's case. She watched in shock as James walked to the witness stand, avoiding her eyes as he was sworn in. Mr. Rothschild, please state your relationship to the parties involved in this case. I'm a venture capitalist. I've been working with Derek Collins on several business ventures over the past year. Sarah felt the world tilt sideways. James wasn't her father's army buddy. He was Derek's business partner. And have you had occasion to observe Miss Martinez's behavior and living situation? Yes, unfortunately I have. I became concerned about the children's welfare after witnessing Miss Martinez's increasing instability over the past several weeks. Catherine Price jumped to her feet. Objection, Your Honor. This witness wasn't disclosed in discovery, and his testimony appears to be based on improper contact with my client. Overruled, Judge Harrison said. The witness may continue. James looked directly at Sarah for the first time since taking the stand, his expression cold and calculating. I attempted to help Miss Martinez by offering her employment opportunities and financial assistance. However, her behavior became increasingly erratic and concerning. Can you give specific examples? She exhibited signs of paranoid thinking, making unfounded accusations against Mr. Collins and his wife. She also demonstrated poor judgment by accepting large sums of money from a relative stranger without asking questions about my motivations. Sarah's hands shook as she realized the scope of the betrayal. Every conversation she'd had with James had been recorded. Every moment of vulnerability, every desperate acceptance of his help had been documented as evidence of her unfitness as a parent. I also observed that Miss Martinez frequently left her children in the care of others for extended periods. During one visit to her apartment, I found the children alone with a teenage babysitter while Miss Martinez was out at bars until the early morning hours. That's not true, Sarah whispered to Catherine, but her lawyer was already on her feet with objections that were being overruled by the judge. The testimony continued for another 20 minutes, each revelation more damaging than the last. James described Sarah as unstable, paranoid, and dependent on the charity of others. He painted a picture of a woman who was so desperate for help that she would trust anyone, including a stranger who claimed to have known her dead father. The entire story about knowing Staff Sergeant Martinez was fabricated, James admitted with apparent reluctance. I researched Miss Martinez's background and constructed a narrative I thought would appeal to her emotions. She accepted this deception without question, which raises serious concerns about her judgment and her ability to protect her children from potential predators. By the time James finished testifying, Sarah felt completely hollowed out. Every moment of hope he had given her, every kindness he had shown, had been part of an elaborate trap designed to destroy her credibility as a parent. During recess, Catherine pulled Sarah aside, her expression grim. This is bad, Sarah. Very bad. Rothschild's testimony is devastating, and the judge clearly believes him. We need to find a way to rehabilitate your image, or we're going to lose this case. How long have Derek and James been planning this? Based on the evidence, probably since before the wedding, they've been setting this up for weeks, maybe months. When the hearing resumed, Catherine did her best to repair the damage. She called witnesses to testify about Sarah's character and parenting abilities, but James's betrayal had poisoned the well. Everything positive that had been said about Sarah now seemed questionable in light of her poor judgment in trusting a stranger. Derek took the stand and played his role perfectly. The concerned father who had been trying to reconnect with his children, the successful businessman who could provide stability and opportunities that Sarah couldn't match. I made mistakes after my divorce, he said, his voice heavy with apparent regret. I was hurt and angry, and I let those emotions keep me away from Emma and Luke. But getting married to Madison has helped me realize what's really important. These children deserve a real home, with two parents who can provide for their needs. Madison's testimony was equally polished. She spoke about her excitement at becoming a stepmother, her plans to quit her modeling career to focus on the children, her dreams of giving Emma and Luke the stable, loving home they deserved. I know I can never replace their mother, Madison said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. But I want to be part of their support system. I want to help give them opportunities that their current situation simply can't provide. Judge Harrison called a brief recess to review the evidence before rendering her decision. Sarah sat in the hallway outside the courtroom, feeling numb and disconnected from reality. Catherine tried to prepare her for different possible outcomes, but Sarah could barely process the words. When they returned to the courtroom, Judge Harrison's expression was grave. This has been a difficult case involving two parents who clearly love their children. However, the court's primary concern must be the best interests of Emma and Luke Collins. Sarah held her breath, praying for a miracle she knew wasn't coming. After reviewing all the evidence and testimony, I find that the current living arrangement is not in the children's best interests. The evidence shows financial instability, inadequate living conditions, and concerning lapses in judgment that raise questions about Miss Martinez's ability to provide appropriate care. The words hit Sarah like physical blows, each one stealing another piece of her soul. Therefore, I am awarding primary custody of Emma and Luke Collins to their father, Derek Collins. Miss Martinez will be granted supervised visitation rights to be conducted at a court-approved facility. The gavel came down like a gunshot, ending Sarah's life as she knew it. Across the courtroom, Derek and Madison embraced while their lawyers shook hands in celebration. Sarah collapsed into her chair, unable to breathe, unable to think, unable to comprehend that her children had just been legally stolen from her by the two people who had systematically destroyed every aspect of her existence. Catherine put a hand on her shoulder, but Sarah couldn't hear whatever words of comfort she was trying to offer. All she could hear was the sound of her own heart breaking, and Emma and Luke's voices asking when Mommy was coming to take them home. The answer was never. Derek had won the final battle, and Sarah had lost everything that mattered in the world. The supervised visitation facility looked exactly like what it was, a place where broken families came to pretend they were still whole. The walls were painted cheerful yellow, decorated with cartoon characters that did nothing to hide the underlying sadness that permeated every corner of the building. Sarah sat at a small plastic table, waiting for Emma and Luke to arrive for their court-mandated 2-hour visit. She had been coming here twice a week for the past month, watching her children slowly adjust to their new reality, while she died a little more inside with each goodbye. The twins bounded through the door with the resilience of youth, running to hug her like they hadn't seen her in years instead of just 3 days. "Mommy!" Emma threw her arms around Sarah's neck. "I missed you so much!" "I missed you too, baby!" Sarah held them both close, breathing in their familiar scent and trying to memorize the feeling of their small bodies against hers. Luke pulled back to look at her with serious 4-year-old eyes. "Mommy, when are you coming to get us? Madison says we live with them now, but I want to come home." Sharon. Sarah's heart shattered a little more. How do you explain to a 4-year-old that home doesn't exist anymore? That the system has decided Mommy isn't good enough? That Daddy and his new wife can provide things that love alone cannot supply? "I'm working very hard to figure that out, sweetheart. But for now you're going to stay with Daddy and Madison, and I'll see you here twice a week." "But I don't like it there," Emma whispered, climbing into Sarah's lap. "Madison smells funny, and she makes us eat vegetables we don't like. And Daddy gets mad when we ask about you." Sarah glanced at the court supervisor sitting nearby, making notes on her clipboard. Every conversation was monitored, every interaction documented to ensure that Sarah didn't say anything inappropriate about Derek or Madison. They spent their precious 2 hours playing with toys, reading books, and pretending everything was normal. Sarah helped Luke build block towers while Emma drew pictures of the three of them together in a house that looked nothing like Derek's mansion or her old apartment. "This is our family," Emma explained, showing Sarah her drawing. "You and me and Luke in our house with the big yard and the dog you promised we could get. It's beautiful, baby. Can I keep it?" Emma nodded solemnly. "It's for you to remember us when we're not here." As if Sarah could ever forget. As if she didn't lie awake every night wondering if they were scared, if they missed their bedtime stories, if they understood why Mommy had suddenly disappeared from their daily lives. When visiting hours ended, the goodbyes were torture. Both children clung to Sarah, begging her to come home with them, not understanding why she had to stay behind while they left with the court-appointed driver who would return them to Derek's house. "I love you both so much," Sarah whispered, kissing their tear-streaked faces. "Never forget that Mom loves you more than anything in the world, and that will never change." After they left, Sarah sat in her car in the parking lot and cried until she had no tears left. Then she drove to her new reality, a studio apartment in the worst part of town, funded by the small settlement James's lawyers had negotiated to avoid a lawsuit over his deception. It was barely larger than a prison cell, with a Murphy bed that folded out from the wall and a kitchenette that consisted of a hot plate and a mini refrigerator. Her mother, Elena, had been moved to the state facility, a grim place where she shared a room with 3 other patients and rarely remembered Sarah's name anymore. The dementia was progressing rapidly, accelerated by the stress of the move and the unfamiliar environment. Sarah had found work at a 24-hour diner, serving coffee and eggs to truckers and insomniacs for minimum wage plus tips. It was the only job she could get with her tattered reputation and the gap in her employment history. The manager knew about her custody battle because everyone in Austin's legal community knew about the Martinez-Collins case. It had become a cautionary tale about single mothers who reached too high and fell too far. But something had changed in Sarah during those first devastating weeks after losing her children. The initial despair had hardened into something else, something that burned cold and bright in her chest during the long nights at the diner. Rage. Pure, focused, unrelenting rage. Not the hot anger that makes people do stupid things, but the kind of fury that clarifies everything, that strips away illusions and reveals the truth underneath. Sarah had been naive, trusting, willing to believe that good intentions and hard work would be enough to protect her family. She was done being naive. Late at night, after her shift at the diner, Sarah began researching. She used the computers at the public library to dig into James Rothschild's business dealings, Derek's company finances, Madison's background. She learned about corporate structures and shell companies, about tax evasion and money laundering, about the dozens of ways that wealthy people hid their crimes behind legitimate business facades. And slowly, piece by piece, she began to uncover the truth. Derek's tech company wasn't as successful as he claimed. The IPO had been based on inflated user numbers and false revenue projections. The patents and intellectual property that formed the company's foundation were built on work Sarah had done during their marriage, work that legally belonged to both of them but had been transferred to Derek through fraudulent documents. James Rothschild wasn't just Derek's business partner, he was the primary investor in the company, and his venture capital firm had been laundering money through Derek's tech platform for years. The custody battle hadn't been about protecting Emma and Luke. It had been about silencing Sarah, the one person who knew enough about the company's early development to expose their fraud. Madison's trust fund was a fabrication. She came from a middle-class family in Ohio and had been living on credit cards and modeling gigs before Derek swept her into his web of lies. Her social media empire was as fake as everything else, built on bot followers and paid engagement. The deeper Sarah dug, the clearer the pattern became. Derek and James had constructed an elaborate house of cards, using stolen intellectual property, fraudulent investments, and social media manipulation to create the illusion of success. And they had destroyed Sarah's life to protect their secrets. But Sarah had learned something important during her months of research. Every house of cards eventually falls, and when it does, the people who built it get crushed underneath. 3 months after losing custody of her children, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She walked into the FBI field office in downtown Austin and asked to speak to someone about financial crimes. The federal agent who interviewed her was a woman named Special Agent Lisa Chen, who specialized in white-collar crime and had seen enough corporate fraud to recognize the real thing when she heard it. "Miss Martinez, these are serious allegations. Do you have evidence to support your claims?" Sarah opened the laptop she had bought with her diner tips and showed Agent Chen months of meticulous research. Financial records, email communications, patent filings, corporate documents, social media analytics. Everything she had been able to gather through public records requests, leaked documents, and careful analysis. "This is impressive work," Agent Chen said after reviewing the materials. "But why come forward now? Why not during your custody battle?" Sarah looked her straight in the eye. "Because they took my children to protect their crimes, and now I'm going to take everything they have to get my children back." Agent Chen studied Sarah for a long moment, perhaps seeing something in her expression that convinced her this wasn't just a bitter ex-wife looking for revenge. "What exactly are you proposing?" I want to help you build a federal case against James Rothschild and Derek Collins. In exchange, I want immunity from prosecution for any unwitting participation in their schemes, and I want protection when this goes public. And what makes you think we're interested in your case? Sarah smiled for the first time in months, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. It was the smile of someone who had been pushed past her breaking point and found something dangerous on the other side. Because James Rothschild's venture capital firm has been used to launder money for 3 different organized crime families. Derek's tech platform has been facilitating illegal gambling operations in 6 states, and Madison's social media empire has been promoting fraudulent cryptocurrency schemes to her millions of teenage followers. Sarah pulled out another folder, thicker than the first. I have evidence linking their operations to wire fraud, tax evasion, racketeering, and securities fraud. This isn't just corporate malfeasance, Agent Chen. This is a criminal enterprise worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And they made one critical mistake when they decided to destroy my life. What mistake was that? They left me alive to find out about it. Agent Chen leaned back in her chair, her expression shifting from skeptical to interested. Miss Martinez, are you prepared to wear a wire? To gather evidence that could be used in federal court? To testify against people who have already proven they're willing to destroy you? Sarah thought about Emma and Luke, about their confused faces during their last visit, about the way they clung to her when it was time to say goodbye. She thought about her mother forgetting her name in the state facility, about the 2 jobs she was working to pay for a studio apartment in the worst part of town, about the systematic destruction of everything she had ever cared about. Agent Chen, they've already taken everything that mattered to me. Now I'm going to show them what someone with nothing left to lose can accomplish. The meeting lasted 4 more hours, with Agent Chen bringing in other investigators and federal prosecutors. By the time Sarah left the FBI office, she had a new identity: federal informant, working undercover to bring down one of the largest financial crimes operations in Texas history. Derek and James had made her into their victim. Now she was going to become their worst nightmare. The game had changed, and Sarah Martinez was no longer playing defense. 6 months later, Derek Collins stood on the stage of Austin's convention center, basking in the applause of 300 technology investors and media representatives. The annual Texas Tech Summit was his chance to announce the next phase of his company's expansion, a breakthrough that would cement his reputation as one of the state's most innovative entrepreneurs. "Ladies and gentlemen," Derek said into the microphone, his voice carrying easily across the packed auditorium, "what I'm about to show you will revolutionize how we think about social media integration and financial services." In the back of the room, Sarah Martinez watched through a live video feed on her laptop, speaking quietly into the wire she wore underneath her server's uniform. She was working the catering staff for the event, invisible among the dozens of service workers who kept Austin's elite fed and comfortable. "He's beginning the presentation now," she said to Agent Chen, who was coordinating the operation from a van outside the building. "The money laundering demonstration should start in about 10 minutes. For 6 months, Sarah had been gathering evidence as a federal informant, working her way back into Derek and James's orbit through carefully orchestrated encounters. It had taken every ounce of acting ability she possessed to convince them she was broken and harmless, a defeated ex-wife who posed no threat to their operations. Derek had been arrogant enough to gloat about his victory, even offering Sarah occasional catering work at his corporate events as a final humiliation. He enjoyed seeing her serve drinks to the same people who had once respected her as an attorney, treating her like hired help while he played the successful businessman. He had no idea that every conversation was being recorded, every financial transaction documented, every criminal conspiracy captured on federal surveillance equipment. "The integration between our social platform and our new cryptocurrency exchange," Derek continued, "will allow users to seamlessly transfer value across multiple international markets without traditional banking oversight." What Derek was actually describing was a sophisticated money laundering operation that used his social media platform to facilitate illegal financial transfers for organized crime families across 3 countries. Sarah had helped the FBI trace the connections over months of careful investigation. James Rothschild sat in the front row, beaming with pride at their criminal enterprise being celebrated as innovation. Beside him, Madison live-streamed the presentation to her millions of followers, many of whom would soon be victims of the fraudulent investment schemes she promoted. Sarah's earpiece crackled with Agent Chen's voice. "Teams are in position. We're ready to move on your signal." "Wait for the wire transfer demonstration," Sarah whispered. "That's when they'll actually commit the crimes on camera." Derek clicked to his next slide, a real-time demonstration of the money laundering system. "As you can see, we can move $50,000 from our Austin servers to accounts in the Cayman Islands, then through Cyprus and back to a clean account in Delaware, all in under 30 seconds. What the audience saw as impressive financial technology, the FBI would recognize as textbook money laundering with live evidence of international financial crimes. "This is it," Sarah said into her wire. "Execute." The first FBI agents entered through the main doors just as Derek began the money transfer. Others came through service entrances, coordinating with local law enforcement to secure all exits. The audience initially thought it was part of the presentation, some kind of elaborate security demonstration. Derek's confident smile faltered when he saw federal agents moving purposefully through the crowd. James stood up from his front row seat, his face pale as he recognized what was happening. "Derek Collins," Agent Chen announced, her voice carrying through the auditorium sound system, "you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, money laundering, and racketeering." The room erupted in chaos. Investors scrambled toward exits that were now blocked by federal agents. Media representatives switched from covering a tech presentation to documenting arrests that would lead national news coverage. Madison tried to run but was intercepted by two agents who had been waiting specifically for her. Her live stream captured her own arrest, broadcasting her humiliation to the same millions of followers she had been defrauding. James Rothschild was arrested simultaneously at his downtown office, along with 14 other members of their criminal enterprise. The FBI had coordinated raids across 6 states, dismantling the entire operation in a single coordinated strike. Sarah watched from the catering area as Derek was led away in handcuffs, his expensive suit wrinkled and his confident demeanor replaced by confusion and fear. For the first time since their divorce, he looked small and vulnerable, just another criminal who had finally been caught. But Sarah felt no satisfaction in his downfall. Her revenge wasn't complete yet. 3 weeks later, she sat in family court again. But this time the circumstances were completely different. Derek's criminal conviction had invalidated the custody arrangement, and Madison's arrest for fraud made her an unfit guardian. Sarah's cooperation with the FBI had not only led to the prosecution of a major criminal enterprise, but had also demonstrated her commitment to protecting her children from dangerous influences. Judge Harrison looked older and wearier than she had during the first custody hearing, perhaps regretting the decision that had placed 2 innocent children in the care of criminals. "Miss Martinez, given the significant changes in circumstances since our last hearing, I am reversing my previous custody order. Emma and Luke will be returned to your primary care immediately." Sarah closed her eyes and felt something she hadn't experienced in almost a year, pure, overwhelming relief. Her children were coming home. But even that victory was bittersweet. Emma and Luke had been traumatized by their months in Derek's house, where they had witnessed arguments, heard frightening phone calls, and sensed the underlying tension of a household built on criminal activity. They would need therapy, patience, and time to heal from experiences no child should endure. Sarah's cooperation with the FBI had resulted in asset forfeiture that included Derek's house, his company, and most of his ill-gotten wealth. The legal settlement for her wrongful treatment during the custody case was substantial enough to provide financial security for her family, but money couldn't repair the months of separation or erase the trauma her children had endured. Elena's condition had continued to deteriorate during the investigation, and she now required full-time care in a specialized dementia facility. She rarely recognized Sarah anymore, but at least she was receiving proper medical attention in a place that treated her with dignity rather than warehousing her with insufficient care. 6 months after the arrests, Sarah stood in the kitchen of her new house, a modest 3-bedroom home, in a good school district where Emma and Luke could grow up safely. The twins were playing in their shared bedroom, their laughter echoing through rooms that finally felt like home. Derek had been sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. James received 25 years for his role as the enterprise's financial mastermind. Madison got 10 years and would likely be deported after serving her sentence, as her visa status had been based on fraudulent financial information. The house of cards had collapsed exactly as Sarah had predicted, crushing everyone who had built their lives on its foundation. But as she tucked her children into their own beds in their own rooms, Sarah realized that her greatest victory wasn't the destruction of her enemies. It was the reconstruction of her family, the restoration of bedtime stories, and morning hugs and the simple joy of being together. "Mommy," Emma said as Sarah kissed her goodnight, "are you going to be here when we wake up?" "Every morning, baby. I'm never leaving you again." "Promise?" "I promise." Sarah turned off the light and stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her children sleep peacefully for the first time in over a year. They were safe, they were home, and they were hers. Derek Collins had tried to destroy her family to protect his criminal empire. Instead, he had created the very weapon that brought him down. Sarah Martinez had learned that the most dangerous enemy you can make is someone who has nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. The wedding invitation that was meant to humiliate her had ultimately led to justice. And sometimes, in a world that often seems unfair, justice is the sweetest victory of all. In the quiet of her children's bedroom, Sarah whispered a prayer of gratitude to her father, whose memory had been twisted into a weapon against her, but whose real legacy lived on in the strength she had found to protect his grandchildren. Miguel Martinez had raised a daughter who would never surrender, who would fight any battle necessary to protect the people she loved. Derek Collins learned that lesson too late, and it had cost him everything. The nightmare was over. The healing could finally begin. If Sarah's journey from victim to victor inspired you, show some love by hitting that like button. Her story proves that sometimes the people who try to break us end up giving us exactly the strength we need to fight back. Drop a comment below and tell me, would you have had the courage to take on powerful criminals to save your family? And if you believe that justice can triumph over corruption, that mothers will move mountains for their children, then subscribe and hit that notification bell. Because this channel is dedicated to stories that remind us why we should never underestimate the power of someone who refuses to stay down. Share this with someone who needs to hear that their current struggles don't define their final chapter. Sarah Martinez's story is proof that sometimes the wedding invitation meant to shame you becomes the evidence that sets you free.